Disclaimer: some of these categories may be slightly dated as our understanding of autism spectrum disorder has grown, or may now be understood to be more autism adjacent, but we still believe there's something to be learned from them, both historically and for people to better understand themselves. Autistic disorder, classic autism. So let's say you're at a bustling party. The music is thumping, people are mingling, and someone is doing the worm dance in one corner. But while everyone else is mingling, you see this guy at the end of the room who's busy lining up the plastic cups by color, memorizing the patterns in the wallpaper, and reciting the entire dialogue of Finding Nemo accurately. Like scary accurately. Well, what you've just witnessed is classic autism in action. And guess what? That's not being weird. That's just a different way of showing up in the world. Classic autism, also called Kanner's autism, which was named after Dr. Leo Kanner, who first described it in 1943, is like the vintage vinyl of the autism spectrum, aka where it all started. Think of it as the OG blueprint for autism diagnoses before terms like autism spectrum disorder became the umbrella phrase we use today. One of the key characteristics of classic autism is a different style of communication. People with classic autism may be nonverbal, have delayed speech, or use alternative ways to express themselves, like gestures, sign language, picture boards, or scripting, aka repeating lines from movies or shows, sometimes with Oscar-worthy deliveries. Some individuals also experience echolalia, where they repeat words or phrases they've heard. Think of it as being your own personal hype man. If you hear someone repeating what you just said, don't assume they're mocking you. They might be using repetition to understand and process language. Another major characteristic that's often seen in children with classic autism is how differently they interact socially. While maintaining eye contact and small talk can come easy for you, a person with classic autism would find this very difficult. In fact, asking them to make eye contact can feel as bad as asking them to literally stare into a solar eclipse. Then there's the almost ritualistic routine process they have. For a person with classic autism, routine is sacred. If lunch is always exactly at noon with the same brand of apple juice, then having lunch at 12:05 or even changing that apple juice is basically a betrayal of the highest order. You wouldn't swap someone's morning coffee with decaf and expect peace, right? Same vibe. Classic autism is typically diagnosed in early childhood, often before age 3, and just so you know, autism is lifelong. Asperger's syndrome. Imagine someone walks into a party. Everyone's chatting about weather and brunch and who ghosted who on Hinge. Then this person heads straight to the corner and starts talking passionately about how black holes bend time with very detailed information and explanations. If someone says, "You should smile more," they'd probably reply with, "Why, this isn't a toothpaste commercial." This is basically Asperger's syndrome, a type of autism characterized by strong language development and average to above average intelligence. We're talking smart, like casually knows 5 dead languages and how jet engines work smart. But when it comes to social situations, that's where things can get spicy. See, most people have invisible social software running in the background. It reads body language, tone, facial expressions, and tells you stuff like when to change the subject if people seem bored, or maybe don't bring up dinosaurs during the funeral. But for people with Asperger's, that social software isn't installed by default. Instead, they learn it manually, like installing Windows 98 from a CD-ROM. They may use scripts like, "Hi, how are you? I'm fine, thanks," or rules like, if someone looks at their phone while you're talking, then they might be bored, to navigate conversations. And no, it's not that they don't care. Quite the opposite. They often care deeply, but need help decoding the very weird, very messy, very inconsistent way humans communicate. I mean, who decided that "I'm fine" sometimes means "I'm mad at you"? Now, one thing you should also know is that people with Asperger's don't do casual. If they love trains, they don't just ride them, they know the history, mechanics, schedule, and probably have a spreadsheet called Express Your Feelings. Whether it's dinosaurs, astronomy, Minecraft, World War II, coding, silent films, or penguins, they go deep. Not fun fact deep, but PhD in passion deep. They're basically walking encyclopedias with Wi-Fi powered by curiosity. Also, if you're enjoying our video so far, please subscribe. Pervasive Developmental Disorder, PDD-NOS. So you're invited to this birthday bash for people on the spectrum, and everyone is expected to wear a particular color. Say red for autism, blue for Asperger's, green for Rett syndrome, you get the idea. But then this beautiful lady walks in wearing a whole rainbow outfit, and even though the bouncer is a little confused and not exactly sure which group she fits into, he's still definitely sure she belongs at this party. That, in a nutshell, was PDD-NOS. PDD-NOS, short for Pervasive Developmental Disorder Not Otherwise Specified, was like the wild card drawer for autism diagnoses. Let's say a kid talks early but doesn't quite get social rules. They're hugging strangers one minute and hiding under tables the next. Or maybe they're organizing their toys like a junior librarian but then totally fine going off schedule at school. This shows signs of classic autism but doesn't exactly check all the boxes of it. And that's where PDD-NOS came in. It was the "you're on the spectrum but not quite in the center of it" label. Basically the psych version of "it's complicated." People with PDD-NOS were often walking contradictions, but in the coolest way possible. They could be great with language, but wouldn't quite read the room. Some also struggled with eye contact, had unusual speech patterns like sounding super formal, robotic, or repeating things. But what really set PDD-NOS apart was that it didn't come with a copy-paste symptom list. It was custom-coded so each person had their own remix of traits, and honestly, that made them fascinating. However, in 2013, the big boss of diagnoses, aka the DSM-5, rolled all the PDDs into one big tent called the Autism Spectrum Disorder. But even though it's not an official diagnosis anymore, understanding it still matters, because it proves that not all developmental differences are black and white. Childhood Disintegrative Disorder, CDD. So let's say you have a little kid, right? This kid is growing up pretty normally, walking, talking, being adorable, crushing it at peekaboo, living their best toddler life. They hit all the milestones. Mom's posting them on Instagram like, "My baby is a genius! Life's good!" Then, all of a sudden, something changes. Not a little change like he doesn't like peas anymore. We're talking about a devastating, heartbreaking loss of skills. The kid who was telling you bedtime stories yesterday can't even form a sentence today. The one who was potty trained at 3 is suddenly having accidents like he's never even heard of a toilet. The bright social personality fades into withdrawal. This devastating and almost surreal change is the hallmark of Childhood Disintegrative Disorder, CDD, a rare and deeply heartbreaking developmental disorder that most people have never even heard of. Basically, childhood disintegrative disorder, sometimes called Heller's syndrome, is one of the rarest developmental disorders known. It affects roughly 1 in 100,000 children, although even that estimate might be generous. It's that uncommon. Here's the key thing. Children with CDD develop normally for at least 2 years. They hit all the early childhood milestones. Walking, talking, playing, socializing. They look like any other typical child. Everything seems fine. Then, between the ages of about 2 and 10, usually around age 3 or 4, their development suddenly reverses. They start to lose skills they had already mastered. This isn't just a temporary setback or a quirky phase. It's a profound and often permanent regression in multiple areas of functioning, such as language skills, both speaking and understanding, social engagement, motor skills, and basic movements like running, drawing, feeding themselves. Imagine a child's brain hitting a sudden, terrifying undo button. That's what CDD looks like. The most frustrating part is that no one knows exactly why it happens. Scientists have been scratching their heads over CDD for decades. Some believe it could be related to brain abnormalities, genetic mutations, or issues with the body's electrical signaling. Others think environmental factors might play a role. One thing we do know, it's neurological, meaning it starts in the brain. But even with brain scans, blood tests, and other medical magic tricks, a single clear cause remains elusive. And it's now technically considered a very rare and severe form of autism. But many old-school clinicians, and honestly anyone who's seen CDD up close, argue that it's different enough to deserve its own category. Watching a child with CDD lose their abilities is often described by parents as feeling like their child has disappeared. It's a profoundly traumatic experience. It's not subtle. It's like watching a vibrant, growing plant suddenly wither overnight. Some children do make progress with intensive therapy. They might regain some communication skills or learn coping strategies. But most will require lifelong support and care. Full recovery, sadly, is very rare to impossible. Rett syndrome. So imagine a baby girl, bright-eyed, babbling, learning to clap her hands and take her first steps. Everything seems perfectly normal, even magical. But then, slowly and without warning, she begins to lose the skills she had just begun to master. It's confusing, heartbreaking, and deeply mysterious. This is the quiet and devastating arrival of Rett syndrome. At its core, Rett syndrome is a rare neurological disorder that primarily affects girls. It's as if the brain's natural wiring process gets hijacked after it's already begun, leading to serious problems with movement, communication, and overall development. What's especially cruel is that children with Rett syndrome usually develop normally at first, only to experience a sudden and devastating regression between 6 and 18 months of age. But why does this happen? To understand Rett syndrome, we have to zoom in, way down to the microscopic world of genes. The villain of this story is a mutation in a gene called MECP2, which lives on the X chromosome. This gene acts a bit like the boss of the brain's communication system, regulating how other genes behave. When MECP2 gets messed up, the brain's development, which is supposed to be a symphony of precise signals, turns into a chaotic jumble. Since girls have 2 X chromosomes, one as a backup, they are more likely to survive this mutation. Boys who only have 1 X chromosome are usually hit much harder by MECP2 mutations and often don't survive infancy. In this strange twist of biology, Rett syndrome becomes a condition that nearly always affects girls. After what seems like normal early development, children suddenly lose skills they had previously mastered, like speaking, walking, or using their hands. Hand movements become especially noticeable. Many girls develop repetitive, almost compulsive motions like ringing, clapping, or tapping their hands. Breathing problems, seizures, scoliosis, and difficulties with eating and swallowing often follow. One of the most important things to understand, though, is that the mind is still very much alive inside. Many girls with Rett syndrome understand far more than they can express. They're trapped inside bodies that won't obey them, trying to find ways to connect with the world. Rett syndrome is extremely rare, affecting about 1 in every 10,000 to 15,000 live female births. To put that in perspective, you have a better chance of winning a weird small-town raffle and getting struck by lightning on the same day than meeting someone with Rett casually. For now, treatment focuses on managing symptoms, physical therapy to improve movement, speech therapy to find alternative ways to communicate, medications to control seizures, and special education plans tailored to each child's needs. Every ounce of care, patience, and creativity goes toward giving these girls the fullest lives possible. Pathological demand avoidance, PDA. PDA is a profile that falls under the autism spectrum. It's like autism's weird, rebellious little sibling who refuses to do what you tell them just because you told them to. It's not about being a jerk or lazy, but it's a deep, anxiety-driven need to stay in control. Basically, PDA stands for pathological demand avoidance. And the pathological here means it's not just casual or occasional, but very serious and persistent. The demand means literally any kind of expectation, from please tie your shoes to can you answer this email, while avoidance means doing whatever it takes to dodge those demands. For someone with PDA, even the simplest request can feel like a full-blown attack on their freedom. And when I say feel like an attack, I mean it triggers real, survival-level anxiety. Their nervous system treats "can you brush your hair?" the same way it might treat "run! There's a tiger!" Because of this, they react creatively, dramatically, and often hilariously to escape the situation. Imagine asking a 5-year-old with PDA to put on their shoes. Instead of a simple no, you might get a whole Broadway production, pretending the shoes are cursed, suddenly becoming a cat who doesn't wear shoes, or launching into a full-scale conversation about why humans should embrace barefoot living. Teens and adults with PDA don't grow out of it, they just get smoother. When asked to do something, they might forget, accidentally sabotage the task, or argue that it's an infringement on their civil rights. Their avoidance techniques can be so clever and creative that if it weren't so stressful for them, you'd almost want to give them a standing ovation. It's important to understand, they aren't avoiding tasks because they're lazy, rude, or rebellious for fun. They're avoiding it because the feeling of being controlled causes intense emotional panic. However, people with PDA often don't fit the traditional picture of autism. Where many autistic individuals struggle with communication or shy away from social interaction, PDA folks can seem extremely social and talkative, sometimes even conventionally charming. They're often described as social chameleons, adapting to situations to avoid demands or maintain control. However, under the surface, they are managing enormous anxiety. Structures and rules, which usually help other autistic individuals feel safe, can actually make someone with PDA feel more trapped and trigger even stronger avoidance. Traditional parenting, teaching, or management styles, things like strict schedules, firm instructions, reward systems, often backfire hard with PDA individuals, leaving everyone frustrated and confused.